Last week had an incredible amount of fights. We had two big boxing fights I want to break down for you guys, and of course, UFC 307. Let's start up on the very first day. We head into Friday. We're going out to Australia, and we're going to have the fight between Janibek Alimkhanuly, who is now 16-0, and he fought Andrei Mikhailovich, who's now 21-1. This was a 9-round defeat, and this helped Janibek to defend his IBF middleweight world title. All right, so that fight, let's break it down a little bit. First of all, the lead-up was very interesting. The fight was supposed to commence a few months ago. Janibek couldn't make weight. A lot of people were questioning whether or not Janibek was going to be able to continue to stay and fight at 160 instead of move up to 168. He comes in lighter than Andrei did, and that was an interesting thing to see right out the gate. But then we start getting notice and notifications and information comes out that, well, Janibek's at has two different belts right now. Well, only one of them, that being the IBF, was actually going to be on the line. And there was a massive issue going on as to what was going to happen with the WBO belt. And so that was a very weird situation. That still doesn't make the most sense at all. It had a lot of stuff depending on the weight classes and weights that weighed in and all these different factors and all that doesn't need to get discussed now. But the point is that there was a chance now, is a chance that possibly gets stripped from him now because of the issue that occurred out there. Regardless, though, this belt was having the IBF middleweight world title on the line, and Janibek came out victorious. It was a easy fight, I say, with Janibek overall. Now, we were going through it, and I'll say this. Mikhailovich earned the respect of most people watching that fight. Janibek was piecing him up from the beginning. It was not a close fight, especially after that second round. It was wild. There was a knockdown involved in it. It seemed like ref ref lost all control of that fight. The bell wasn't ringing on the right time. All kinds of weird stuff was happening in that second round. Regardless, though, somehow it helped Mikhailovich be able to make it through that round and continue to fight. Now, what we saw happen and occur there was that for Janibek, at least, he really did solidify himself as that guy. You know, a lot of people already had him in that group anyway, so it's not too crazy to say that statement, but he made it very, very clear that he is the premier guy in 160 at this point in time. What I want to say is that, yes, Mikhailovich had a great heart. He deserves respect. He fought through, somehow made it all the way up to 9 rounds. He was getting beaten for literally 9 rounds straight, pretty much. He made it through that, had a couple of different maneuvers or whatever that might have been decent. But overall, Janibek worked him real good in that fight. Now, what I want to admit, though, is that for Janibek, as I said, he basically made himself solidify as one of the top guys at 160. A weight class that is not very, very stacked. However, there are a few names that are intriguing. That includes the other two guys that hold a belt currently, and Carlos Adames, Erislandy Lara. Both those guys would be intriguing fights. But I'm going to address it later on. What we have heard is that Hamza Shiraz seems to be the one we're going to attack now. He doesn't currently have a belt. I think he's personally the second best fighter at 160 right now, and you could potentially set themselves up to have an incredible fight. The only thing I will say is this. I think that both Janibek and Hamza Shiraz would defeat both Adames or Lara, whichever one wanted to fight with either one. And if you could possibly get that to be an undisputed fight next year, I would prefer that route because I think those are the two top guys. Regardless, though, I'm not going to have anything bad I get to say about potential Janibek versus Hamza Shiraz fight because that would be an insane fight to see. I'd be all for that one. I'd like to see that fight occur. So regardless, I think there's 3 options for Janibek next. Carlos Adames, Erislandy Lara, or Hamza Shiraz. All 3 incredible fights. All 3 need to happen. Either go for undisputed, defeat the young up-and-coming guy in Hamza Shiraz. Regardless, I think that'd be an intriguing fight to see. Then let's head over to Saturday. We go to the early afternoon portions, at least where I'm at, and you see Nick Ball has a hometown fight back home in Liverpool, first time defending his belt. He is 20-0-1 now in his career. He fought Ronny Rios, made him 34-5 after he defeated him by KO in the 10th round. He defends his WBA featherweight world title. That was an intriguing fight. Let me say this before I go into detail. Actually, let me say about the fight. The fight obviously was Nick Ball in control from the get-go. Not surprising, it's the way Nick Ball runs. He fought with great aggression, right in your face, right in your grill, attacks you from the beginning of the fight to the end of the fight. He made his statement known. He obviously got knocked down early in the fight. Then he obviously gets his nose busted up, slowed him down a little bit there, but then obviously goes crazy and gets the KO in round 10 by literally getting Ronny Rios out of the ring. Literally. Obviously, anyone seen that KO, it was quite the KO to watch and see there. So Nick Ball made his statement there. And what I want to make clear is this. Nick Ball has become one of the most entertaining fighters to watch in boxing. It's hard to watch Nick Ball and not walk away saying that was a good use of time. Nick Ball will always put his best foot forward. He's going to attack from the beginning to the end. He's not going to run from anybody. He's going to be pushing the pedal from the first round to the 12th round if that is what has to occur. He is a very, very good fighter as well. Don't get that twisted. He's a guy that not only is a champion right now, but would not shock me if he possibly goes forth and tries to become undisputed at this weight class in featherweight. Nick Ball is a guy that I think has the potential to do just that. He's earned this belt, and what's next for him possibly? Well, I like the Ray Vargas rematch. Many would say Nick Ball won that fight, myself included. Go get that belt. That gets him 2 of them. You could also go and try to unify with Angelo Leo, Rafael Espinoza. All those fights would be great as well. I think the biggest one you have to do is Ray Vargas, though, for that rematch. Yes, there's another guy up and coming in America that we all know about. That's up at 126 now. Seven Fulton. Cool boy. I would not mind seeing that fight as well. But if I'm Nick Ball, what I'm approaching right now is saying, hey, let's go for undisputed because I think he has the potential and the capabilities of doing just that. And if I'm Stephen Coolboy Fulton, go fight Angelo Leo because I know Rafael Espinoza just got a fight signed and it should be agreed to, I believe, in December now. But we're going to see what that unfolds in a little bit. However, Stephen Fulton, go get those guys, and then can we see possibly a unification or maybe an undisputed fight in the future between Nick Ball and Fulton? That'd be interesting to watch there. But regardless, Nick Ball is the real deal. Nick Ball is very, very talented. He's one of the most entertaining fighters to watch. There's no way you watch Nick Ball and don't get entertained watching him fight. Those are the recaps for the 2 boxing matches that went down this past weekend. And now let's head over to MMA UFC 307. Just to keep it a little preview of what UFC 307 brought, it was not the best card from top to begin to top from the beginning to the end. If it wasn't for that main event, you're looking at one of the not the best to say the least cards of the year and maybe for a while now. The reason I say that is that there was a lot of things that occur that you just don't want to see in MMA. You don't want to see injuries that just didn't need to happen like the Kevin Holland one. You don't want to see the atrocity of what happened with Mario Bautista. That was ridiculous. The co-main event was subpar. A lot of stuff that did not need to happen in that fight happened. However, I'm going to break it down for us, and we're going to start off with the main event because that's the best thing that happened, and I want to make sure that we get to that right out the gate. So, main event occurs. Alex Pereira makes his 3rd title defense of this calendar year, and it's basically his 4th within a calendar year in total if we look at a 365-day calendar. He defeats Khalil Rountree to retain his light heavyweight title fight. Alex Pereira gets TKO fight victory in round 4, 4:32 mark. Now, remember this, Rountree was up 29-28 heading into the 4th. Obviously, regardless of what would have emerged and happened in that 4th round, let's say the KO didn't happen, Pereira would have won that fight. It would have been tied up heading into round 5. That being said, let's discuss this fight because there's takeaways I want to have for both the winner and the loser. Starting with Khalil Rountree, though. I'm somebody that absolutely hates the idea of possibly saying somebody won when they lost a competition. And so by no means did obviously Khalil Rountree win this fight, but can I say this? When you look at it from an image perspective, the way that the public will view him, it's hard to not say that Khalil Rountree won to some extent. What Khalil Rountree did in that fight was he stepped up, he gave it his all, he truly stayed to his word, and he fought as a true warrior. The pictures of what he had to go through in that fight is excruciating pain to say the least. And he fought through, gave his best foot forward, even hurt Alex Pereira a couple of times in that fight. He gave Alex Pereira the toughest fight that he's had to go through in quite some time. He was ultra competitive. He did not back down. He did not just go to tackle or wrestle or do any of the other garbage I'm going to talk about happened early in the cards. Khalil Rountree displayed true warrior mentality from the time the fight started to the time that he got KO'd. He gave it everything he had. And then on top of that, not once have we heard an excuse from him. Not once have we heard him make a lame statement about an injury or something that hindered him from not being able to fight. Not once did we see him blaming somebody else or making all this other stuff that we see from other guys, maybe like the last guy Alex Pereira fought or 2 fights ago. Just throwing that out there. But what Khalil Rountree did is that he earned the respect of everybody. No, he was not victorious in that fight, and maybe he'll never be a world champion. But what I do know is that Khalil Rountree made his mark in that fight by saying, you know what? I'm not no joke. I can compete with the best of them. I just gave Alex Pereira the best fight he could possibly have asked for and the hardest thing he's had to go through in a long, long time. And I made my mark in that night. And yeah, I lost. But guess what? The people love me now. My fan base just skyrocketed. The respect that people have for me is immense now because of what I just did. And so from that mindset, I see in a certain view of light that yes, he ultimately did, in a sense, win that day because of the way he acted, the way he fought, and the way he's been handling the loss ever since. So massive respect and props to Khalil Rountree. Now for the winner, Alex Pereira. I hear all these debates currently going on Twitter. What if the mega fight that happens next month, Max Holloway to Peña? What if the winner wins that fight? If Max pulls out the upset or Peña beats both Holloway and Volk in a single year? Is that the fight of the year? And to that I say absolutely not. I say most years, yes. Most years I will say that winner of that fight would be fight of the year. Not this year. Yes, the winner of that fight will have had 2 bigger wins in name and talent than Pereira would have had this year. But we have to factor in the outside circumstances that involved why this year was so special for Alex Pereira. Because this was an all-time great UFC year by Alex Pereira. You talk about fighting, and I know this does not count, but 4 times essentially in a 365-day window. Now, we're only going to look at this year because that's what it counts for, but 3 fights this year, 3 title defenses. He had KO wins in every single one of them. All of them were entertaining. He saved multiple cards, and he stepped up no matter what, whenever, wherever, defined what a true warrior fighter is, and he made a statement no matter what it was. This last fight, sick, injured a little bit, still goes out, gets the KO, and has an incredible outing. He has one of the biggest cards in 300. He has to step up and show up and made a big statement and made that card successful. Then you look at 303. It was supposed to be a big Conor McGregor show. He shows out and he puts on an absolute performance, saving that card, which could have been a complete train wreck. You have to equate not just what he did in the octagon, but you have to look at what he did outside of it, how he prepared, how he showed up, even when circumstances were against him, even when it doesn't make any sense for him, even when he's a champion. 3 fights in 1 year. Didn't have to do that. He showed up and showed out. He showed the true warrior mentality, and for that, he has to be the UFC Fighter of the Year. No other way around that. He saved the UFC too many times this year for him not to be that. He put on an absolute show and showed why he is legitimately one of, if not the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world. I get Islam's number 1. I have nothing against anybody who wants to say he's number 2. So what's next for Alex Pereira? Well, you've got 3 options right now. I'll call it really 2 because number 1, Jon Jones, sure. We all would like to see him go to heavyweight and fight Jon Jones, but for Jon Jones, we all know what's going to happen in Madison Square Garden. He's going to go out there, he's going to destroy Stipe, he's going to have an all-time great performance, Dana White's going to love it, and then he's going to retire at that point in time. Now, I would love to be wrong in this statement, but I think that's what we can kind of assume is going to happen here. So let's move Jon Jones out of the picture, and let's move to what's more possibly realistic. At that point in time, Jon Jones retires, Aspinall will become the official heavyweight champion of the world. Having Alex Pereira fight Tom Aspinall would be insane for multiple reasons here. One of which, that's 2 mega names. It'd be a mega fight to see, but the legacy standpoint. Let's just imagine for a moment. Alex Pereira becomes a 3-division champion, and what you could say would probably be, if you could pick any 3 weight classes to be the hardest at, would be the back and the highest 3 heaviest weight classes for Alex Pereira. That would be an insane legacy fight for himself. You're talking about defeating guys at 185, 205, and then heavyweight. That's tough to do. And so the potential opportunity for Alex Pereira to move to heavyweight and become undisputed champion of the world in the UFC at heavyweight, defeating Tom Aspinall, would have to submit him in a position to be the greatest fighter of all time in the UFC, if not mixed martial arts when you factor in his past history as well. So when you're looking at Alex Pereira, that fight just from a legacy standpoint would be mega. One of the biggest fights you can make in all the UFC possibly. And then you have the third option for him to possibly go fight, stay up 205, and go fight Magomed. That's obviously on the table. Now, Magomed has to go take care of business in his next fight in a couple of months or weeks, whatever it is, against Rakic. But that's going to be something to keep an eye on. I'm intrigued to see how that unfolds right there. My preference, of course, Tom Aspinall. That's one of the biggest fights in the world to see. Magomed would be something that, I have to see what he's performs in the next fight anyways. He has to get through Rakic first, and that even is going to be on the table. However, even if to stay at 205, we've seen enough of him. I'd rather see Pereira go up to heavyweight. So that's possibly what's next for Alex Pereira. Going back down to Khalil Rountree real quickly. What's next for him? Jamal Hill. It's the fight you have to go make. It will be intriguing. I know a lot of people kind of split. Who do you think wins on that? Maybe it's a recency bias. I think Khalil will win that fight. But still, 2 great guys. Will be interesting to see how that fight unfolds. And I think I know who a lot of people would go for in that fight. Because obviously one guy, Jamal Hill, he's learned how to damage his reputation really quickly right now, which is unfortunate for himself. But Rountree, Hill, next year, we'll love to see that fight unfold. Let's go back down to the rest of this UFC 307 card. Co-main event, Julianna, Peña. She defeats Raquel, Pennington for the title fight. She wins on split decision. Not the best fight in the world. Not the most entertaining fight. Not the best situation. It is what it is. I'm not even going to go too deep into it because ultimately, as I said, this card outside of the main event was not very good. Lots of disappointing fights, lots of disappointing moments, a lot of unfortunate circumstances that unfolded in this UFC 307 card. However, you now have a champion once again, Julianna Peña, and she's now got a decision to make who she's going to fight next. You ask anyone in the UFC world, I think we all know the person that she should fight next is the one that also got a victory that night, Mikhailovich Harrison. But she refused to want to go and take that fight on the spot. Now, does Dana White force that? Whatever happens, I hope so. Because I think we all want Peña Harrison. That's a massive fight to make. If not, then who knows what she's going to end up doing. Could it be another rematch? Could it be something else? Who knows? It has to be Mikhailovich Harrison. I don't even want to list anybody else because it needs to be Mikhailovich Harrison, Julianna Peña. Let's go to the other fight. Is it the most controversial fight of the year? I don't know because there's been a lot of controversial fights this year. But Mario Bautista, he defeats Jose Aldo. Bantamweight division. Split decision. Talk about debatable. Why do I say debatable? Sure, when you look at the stats and you break down the stats, you can make an argument in case that Mario did get the win significantly, whatever you want to call it. Watch the fight. Yes, in a certain weird way of looking at it, you could say that the way he fought was a proper way, if you want to call it. Yes, he may have won by control time or whatever it was. That's garbage fighting. When you talk about fighting, I understand this. We're talking MMA. There are rules. It's not just a street fight. But the way he's wrestling, when you wrestle to stall time, as Dana White, I think Dana White said this perfectly. When you wrestle to just stall time, that's a big mistake that you can't be doing. If you're wrestling to get the guy out of there as your goal should be, that's different. We see wrestlers, there's nothing wrong with those guys. What happened in this fight was an atrocity, especially when you have the opportunity to go fight a guy in Jose Aldo, one of the all-time great MMA fighters, a first ballot Hall of Famer. You could say most people have him on the Mount Rushmore top 5 fighters of all time. And you're going to have the opportunity to fight him on this big stage, and that's the performance you do is ridiculous. Absolutely debatable performance because ultimately at the end of the day, I don't think anybody would be against having Jose Aldo win that fight. You can make a very, very clear argument case that this was a messed up scorecard to begin with, and Jose Aldo should have been victorious that night as well. So what do I have to say is next, though? Mario did get the win. So what do I possibly say is next for him? Well, you have Song Yandin. That could be a guy you fight. Marlon Vera is another guy on the table. But let me just be honest with you, everybody. Whoever is next for him, it is what it is. But yes, he won the fight. I don't think anybody thinks of him any higher now. So he's not just going to go skyrocketing and get some bigger fight now. There's no emphasis that UFC is going to want to reward him for that performance. So ultimately, those are names I just threw out there. Not solid or sold on any of them, though. What's next for Jose Aldo? Listen, when we look at this fight, and I've been just kind of going through Twitter and seeing what people think about this as well, and it seems like everyone's in agreement with me. That's a loss that when we look at it, yes, he's going to have the loss in his loss column. But does anybody really think that Jose Aldo lost that night? What I think happens, he went out there, got barely any damage, and we look at him and say, hey, you didn't really lose that night. What are you supposed to do? It was a ridiculous performance. And so he's an all-time legend. He's earned whatever he wants. If he wants a bigger fight, I give it to him. If he wants to retire, let him retire. Whatever it is that Jose Aldo wants to do, him and Dana White can figure that out. Is he going to be able to go on another title run? I highly doubt that. However, letting him fight whatever he wants to do, however it's going to look, that's up to him and Dana White. So I don't really have specific names because he did lose this fight, obviously, on paper at least. It'll be interesting to see where they go from there. So I'm not going to give any specific names for who I think should be next for Jose Aldo. The next fight, also disappointing to a certain extent. Roman Dolidze, he defeats Kevin Holland in the middleweight division. This was another one of those. Roman had a sensational round 1 performance. Absolutely beat Kevin Holland up in that fight. However, Kevin Holland easily could have continued fighting in that fight had the rib injury not occurred. And the rib injury was a situation where it occurred, but did it have? It just feels like it was a freak accident the way it occurred, right? And so when we talk about that, we don't ever want it to be a situation where, okay, you have a rib injury, disgusting looking overall how it happened, but you're in the corner, you just can't move right, and that's the way you're just going to have to call it. It was a weird situation, unfortunate fight the way it went down. Obviously, a lot of people love Kevin Holland. I love Kevin Holland. And so to have that first round TKO heading into before the second round, it just was an unfortunate way, bad way for the fight to go. Nobody really wants to see that to be the way you win a fight. And so that's what happens, though. So what's next for Roman Dolidze? Well, you have Paulo Costa. Interesting fight. I could see it being made there. Chris Curtis would be interesting to see. Brandon Allen, Jared Cannonier. Those are all guys I could possibly see as fights for Dolidze next. As for Kevin Holland, obviously we know he's a guy that can fight at multiple weight classes. If you're going to stay at middleweight, Chris Curtis, Paulo Costa as well, Michael Pereira. Or you can go down to welterweight. A guy that I'm going to talk about next who just also lost, Cowboy, Stephen Thompson. You could fight that one. Would be interesting to see. Michael Morales at welterweight. Obviously, that's the thing on the table. Kevin Holland's a guy that Dana White knows is going to sell good tickets. Everybody knows he's loved. He's going to have to recover from his injury now, though. He's an active fighter. We're going to see him back again real soon. And so it's going to be interesting to see where he goes from here. But lots of things on the table, Kevin Holland. We always know that he's got immense potential, yet he sometimes, he doesn't necessarily take it seriously to the extent that he probably could have and become as good as he possibly could have at one point in his career. So therefore, where does he go from here is really up to whatever they decide for him within the UFC. Let's head over to the last one I want to address today. Joaquin Buckley, he defeats Stephen Thompson, welterweight division, third round TKO, 2:17 left in the third round. Now, before I go any further and discuss this fight, the scorecards were all over the place. When we look at this, you literally had every possible combination up until that point. You had one card that was tied at 19-19. You had another card that was 2018 in favor of Buckley. You had another card that was 2018 in favor of Stephen Thompson. So this fight could have gone any way depending on how that round went. It truly was a situation where you were going to have to put it into your own hands, or you're going to have to let the judges decide. This could have been a controversial one. So, Joaquin Butler, this is the one I want to say about him. Joaquin Butler is a guy that, in my opinion, has solidified himself as one of the best up-and-coming welterweight fighters in the UFC. He's already been moved up once again in the rankings, and I think he's going to continue to skyrocket. And I don't think it's just because of how good he is. He's an exceptional fighter, but might I add one other aspect to him? He has the branding to be a legitimate superstar. He knows how to mess with the media. He knows how to make his name big. He knows how to make himself trend. And on top of that, he then backs it up when he gets into the octagon and he fights. He backs up what he says, and he puts on a show and a statement. His fights are always entertaining. I think he has all the tools to be a legitimate superstar in the future in the UFC. He's something that I'm extremely, extremely high on, and I'm excited to see what he's got. Because in this fight, like I said, who knows what could have happened. So many stuff is on the table. Fight is coming down to just going to likely be in the hands of the judges, and the judges' scorecards were all over the place. He takes matters into his own hand, has a nasty KO on Stephen Thompson, lights out, fight's over, he's victorious, moves on, and I think he's going to be an exceptional guy going forward. So what do I got next for him? This time around, I know the last one was trending once again, debated for the Conor McGregor one. This was a more realistic one I like to see. Kamaru Usman. I'm all for that one. Very entertaining. I get Usman at the back of the line, all those different things. Listen. That's a fight I'd like to see unfold. Would be all for that one. That's the one that I think Buckley can go get a statement, get a big name on his resume. Would be huge for his career. Let's go down to a couple of the guys. Colby Covington, I could see that one as well. I would favor Joaquin Butler easily in that one. But that would be an intriguing fight to see as well. Gilbert Burns is also on the table. One guy ranked in front of him. Would be all for seeing that one unfold. Well, what's next for Stephen Thompson, though? Obviously, a beloved UFC fighter. And he's got a lot of stuff on the table for himself, possibly now. Whatever he wants to do is in his hands. But you have Venom Page, would be a very interesting fight to see. I'd be intrigued to see that one. Michael Morales could be possible. Gilbert Burns even. Yes, I know he's ranked in front of him still, and he's coming off a loss, but that could be a good fight to see be made as well. Ultimately, we'll see what unfolds, but there's a lot of fights that can be made. UFC 307, as I said. Alex Pereira saved the day once again. Was not the best card in the world. It had a lot of ups and downs, a lot of things that just didn't go as planned that you wouldn't want to see in a card. But we're only a couple weeks out now from the Abu Dhabi UFC 308. Max Holloway, Ilia Topuria. They'll be fighting for the overall championship there. We know how big of a fight that's going to be. That's what we can look forward to. But for UFC 307, solid night overall, but obviously was not the best card overall if it wasn't for Alex Pereira and Khalil Rountree's mega fight to end the grand finale out there.